Hey guys, NJ here. Today we're looking at something pretty exciting. Well, certainly I think so. This is my Archon V1, not the subject of this video, but it's a good intro to where we're going to go with this. Now, I have been running this as my main freestyle frame for well over a year since its release, and it has just been a fantastic frame. Nothing on this quad has been replaced or changed. I've broken nothing. Despite the rumours, I do crash, guys. I may not always throw it in my footage, but I do crash, and I have had some pretty hard crashes with this into trees and various other immovable objects, and it has just held up so damn well. One of the things I absolutely loved about the design of this, which was just great engineering, was this 3-point brace for the front pod. You can see here you've got a lower plate, a plate above that, and then the top plate. And what that does is when you get a frontal impact coming into the quad, it distributes that shock across all three layers, which of course I believe it's a bit of a tip of the hat to the way a lot of F1 stuff is designed, the Formula 1 cars. It's got that similar bracing system so that it can absorb frontal impacts. Not necessarily frontal impacts at 200 mile an hour, mind, but it's certainly held up fantastically, and this one has had absolutely no real damage whatsoever, just tiny nicks and scuffs and bits from general use, but it's held up magnificently. There's no real flex to speak of in the arms. Nothing has moved, nothing's become soft. Part and parcel of that is the fact that these are produced with Armatan carbon. Armatan cut the carbon for this design for HaloRC, so it is all premium stuff, but of course without the crazy premium prices of some of the higher Armatan products. But anyway, I digress. Let's have a look at its replacement. So this guy here, I'll move this out the way a little bit, is the Archon V2. Now this is everything I think that a V2 should be of anything. It's not a complete overhaul where the whole thing is just doesn't resemble the first one. It does look like an Archon. The only difference is that this has been refined in all the right areas. Now, I did chat a fair bit with Chris when he first produced this and gave my sort of 2 cents about what bits need maybe adjusting here and there. Very, very receptive designer. He's always willing to listen to what people have to say, and he always incorporates things that he thinks are sensible into the designs. Taking nothing away from Chris, he is an absolutely brilliant engineer and comes up with some incredible designs, no doubt. But what he's done with the Archon V2, when this arrived for me to build into, I had pretty much no input into this one at all. He just kind of came to me and said, surprise, I've got the Archon V2, and every little refinement I've looked at on this I've been so impressed with, and I haven't felt like there's anything really that I need to niggle and pick with, so kudos to Chris for that. So let's go over what sort of fundamentally changed about this. I guess probably the obvious one, you can see it does look a fair bit smaller and skinnier, and it is. What's going on here this time, despite being a 5-inch build, if you can see here, if I tilt these two up, this is now set up for a micro camera. And why not? There's no need to really use full-size cameras in 5-inch quads anymore. The micros are getting so damn good, you might as well save the weight, keep everything that little bit smaller and lighter. Makes total sense. I mean, I think that's a great idea. In this one, I've loaded the new Foxeer Falcor. I'll tell you a little bit about what I think about that camera, maybe a bit later in this. If not, it will be coming up. But yeah, micro camera to fit in this. That has also meant that the whole front pod can be a fair bit smaller. If I put these two side on, you can see there's a significant reduction. Now, what I was talking about earlier with that 3-point bracing design, I was worried. I thought, please say you haven't got rid of that. It works so well, and he hasn't. Chris has left that in. You can see here you have the same kind of thing. Try and angle that right. You got the lower, the mid, and then if I get the XT60 out of the way, you can see where the upper brace falls into place as well. So you have that 3 brace impact, which makes it super tough. One thing that people did ask for was a slightly thicker top plate. Now, this was quite wide how the bracing on this was done. It was this kind of staggered pattern meant for an incredibly tough and strong brace across the top. So this was actually only 1.5mm thick, and initially people were thinking that was going to break, but I don't know anyone that broke one of these. I certainly didn't, and I thought it was, you know, absolutely fine. Either way, Chris has decided to increase the thickness of the top plate, so that's now at 2mm. He's also gone with much skinnier arms. Now, I won't use that dirty word aerodynamics when we're talking about quads, because there is nothing aerodynamic about a quad, people. Don't ever listen to anyone who says there's something aerodynamic about them. There isn't. There's the props, obviously, but when it comes to the actual quad, they're just an enormous draggy mess. So really what you're doing is drag management and trying to reduce drag as much as possible, move parts of the carbon as far, you know, as just getting out of the way of the airflow and the vortices is the real big thing. So for that reason, I've always been a big advocate of skinny arms, and these weren't exactly fat arms, but they have been reduced by a significant amount. And if I get my calipers out, I can just give you a quick look at that. So at the minute, the standard arms in terms of width are, it looks like 14.5mm across, whereas the new ones, we put those in, are coming in at 10mm across. So yeah, that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the way to go. Now obviously when you make the arms skinnier, the important thing is to make them thicker to keep them strong, and he has, they're now a 5mm thick arm, so super strong, super tough. One thing that's also been retained here is these breakaway sections on the front. You can see that on both designs, and they're designed, as the name suggests, to actually break off and absorb the force of a hard impact. I mean, most impacts it won't break, but it will protect the motor. But they have got this hole in there so that they have a point which will allow them to fracture with a really hard impact, so that they don't just completely wreck the arm. You can continue to fly or race or whatever it is you're doing, and of course you've got good protection from for the motors. So that design carries forward as well. You've still got the 6 standoffs from top to bottom. In terms of the bracing, now this was a really great thing. I remember this, looking at how sort of 5-inch quads, a lot of quad designs are kind of done the same way, where you have this kind of cross in the middle and all 4 arms meet in the middle, couple of holes in the arms. And what you can tend to find is you have to really torque these down to stop these moving on most quad designs. Now the Archon, this was actually pretty solid. There's maybe, there you go, there's a little bit, can you see that? But this is after over a year of use, so obviously there is a little bit of play. But many frames designed like this will do that anyway, and that's part of the nature of having them come together in this design. It's not perfect at holding them in a rigid brace and stopping them moving laterally like that. So what he did was completely redesign this. He did a lot of R&D and a lot of testing, a lot of messing around with different designs. But what he's gone for is this kind of circular bracing system, and this actually only requires 1 bolt in each arm, and the end result, I don't know if you can see how these all meet up here, so that they're actually at 90 degrees to each other, bracing and distributing any kind of force or impact around this circular bracing form. And this makes for an absolutely crazy rigid structure. I mean, there is just nothing. There is nothing in the way of movement. I can't budge that at all. So that is obviously something that he's worked on, and I think it is it's fantastic. You've also got a little less material in the middle, which is a good thing, but it is a super strong bracing system, so that's fantastic. There's another benefit of this. If you run a 20x20 stack, which the old Archon didn't accommodate for, I had to use a conversion plate to go down to a 20x20 stack on my 6-inch Archon. This natively supports the 20x20 stack hole pattern, but obviously because you have this section missing out the middle now, you can actually just use nice short screws to go to the standoffs. You don't have to use massive long screws to get through 5mm of carbon first before you get to your stack. And it also makes them independent of the arms, so any shock travelling around the arms or any kind of ding, it's not going to pass much up to the stack, because they're independently braced on that plate above it, because having the bolts go through the arm, sometimes that can cause enough shock to cause nylon standoffs to break. So that was another brilliant thing. And as I said, you've actually just got one bolt. The less bolts you have in an arm, the less fracture points, the stronger the arm's going to be. So this just has one bolt that's actually going through the arm. The rest is held with compression, and as I said, it is solid as a rock. If I tilt this slightly, you can probably maybe just about see that this bolt, you can actually see the metal of this bolt here. So it's not actually, there you go, it's not actually going through an arm. But as I said, just brilliant in terms of the way that is put together, and it's made for a super strong structure. So the next thing to look at, the GoPro mount. Now, because of this smaller, another benefit of having this smaller pod, the whole thing, that the height of the GoPro, everything has, let me try and line these two up, you can see the GoPro has come down, and obviously that's another good thing, because having the GoPro sitting lower to the center of gravity makes for better handling still, so that's a great thing. How the GoPro attaches on here is pretty cool as well. That has actually, it clamps in through this standoff that goes across here, and then it has a lip under it which slips underneath this top plate, and I'll show you that because I need to get the top off of this so you can have a look at what's going on inside. So just before I take this top plate off, one thing I should mention here, a couple of things actually. It still has these recesses here, these curves, and they're not just an aesthetics thing, they're actually designed so that the strap will stay caught in this area and won't slip or move around. The straps stay put, because like the old Archon, this one is designed to be used without a battery pad, and believe you me, the batteries absolutely do not budge on this thing. And the second little design feature is having these bars here so that your strap can come in through the underside, up over the top of the bar, and then back through. And what that does is essentially act like a belt buckle and just hold the strap in place, so when you take your strap off to take your battery away, they don't kind of slip or move around or fall out. They just stay exactly where you want them to be. Makes ratcheting the strap down as well really nice. So that's another great thing in terms of the top plate design. If I very carefully now pull this off, we should be able to see exactly what's going on. So there you can see how the TPU GoPro mount, this is for a session 5, uses the design has a little lip so that it's captive under there, and then the standoff passes through here. So that's how that goes down onto the actual plate. This I'm really proud of the way this printed out. I actually did this with my Ender 3. I did a video on that 3D printer. If you're interested in getting into 3D printing, very cheap, sub $200 3D printer, I'll put a link in the description to that video. But you can either buy your TPU accessories from the HaloRC shop, or you can also download the STL files. They're freely available if you want to print all the TPU parts yourself. And you can see I've gone for a kind of blue, purple and black theme with this one. So that's how that goes. Let me put the top plate off to one side as well, and we can have a little bit of a closer look at what's going on here. Now what I've gone for here is a 20 by 20 stack. Now this is the same stack that I ran in the 6-inch Archon, and this is the HaloRC F440 V2. I did 4 videos in a series on testing this stack and how it would perform, and we ended up going to testing it on the 6-inch with 5S. Very capable stack. I've got a bunch more stacks coming to have a look at, so keep an eye on the channel. There's, I really think this could be the way forward, having 20 by 20 hardware, if it performs, and it certainly looks like they are starting to perform now, and you know, and on BL Heli 32, which is fantastic. It certainly was great on my 6-inch, and it's certainly fantastic on this as well. This is primarily a 4S setup. I will be looking at some 6S setup stuff as well, but I'm trying to stay on topic here. So one of the things that I've done here, this is the way the board's orientated, because it's sitting on connecting pin blocks. It has to be orientated this way round. It does have side connections. Now one of the nice things is you have a gap here between the side plate and the standoff at the front. So I have my XT60 coming out there. It folds back, goes underneath the strap to connect, so everything's held nice and tidy and out the way, but you could easily come out the back. There's plenty of room to run that way if you so desired. So as I said, the allegedly 200 amp BL Heli 32 F440 stack in there, and I've also got the VTX as part of that stack, and that is connected at the back here. There is a hole pattern for a second 20 by 20 at the back, which is just genius, because lots of VTXs and other bits, even the TBS Crossfire stuff, is now coming with a mounting plate that is a 20 by 20 you can sit the Nano stuff into. So having that second stack available back here is a brilliant idea. And there's two further holes, if I can just angle it right. Can you see here and here? There's obviously, you've got, if I move these wires out the way, you can see you've got the mounting holes here for a traditional 30 by 30 board, if you want to put that in there. And you've also got two more 30 by 30s back here, and that is if you're running a half stack component, something like the Maytech VTX, which is just half of a 30 by 30, so it's like 30 by 15. So you can mount any hardware like that to the back. So it's got all the hole patterns for a load of different mounting options, which is fantastic. But as I say, I've got my VTX back here. This is running a UFL connection to a Unify SMA pigtail. This is one of the STL files that will be available, which has a universal mount and a Unify mount in TPU, and the TPU completely surrounds the actual connector. And try and get it out the way there. There you go. You can see that. So there's no danger of the connector or the actual metal part of the Triumph there, or your antenna of choice, from touching the carbon. So really good thought into the design of the accompanying TPU part. So it all works really well. In terms of how the frame goes together, I mean, it's pretty much what you see. It's very straightforward. It's using press nuts in here. This does raise these front standoffs slightly, and the way Chris decided to go about dealing with that was to add whatever that is, I think maybe 2 mil in height, to the internal height of this TPU part. So once you put this TPU part on top of the standoffs, it then brings it level with the whole plate, which is a great idea and works wonderfully. I've got this, there's a couple of options available for mounting your, if you're running Crossfire and you want to mount your Immortal antenna, you can either get the STL files for this type of bracing, or you can get one that is similar to the V1 design, which was to have on the back of the GoPro. The only reason that I personally didn't want to do that was because everything's a little bit lower profile. Having the Immortal mount here would mean that it would actually take it uncomfortably close to where the props are. So I didn't really like that idea this time round. And you could raise it higher on the GoPro mount, but then the problem is you start encroaching, that's going to stick out a bit and encroach on space for the battery to buck up. You want the battery to buck up as close as possible to the session, and it just pushes the battery back a bit. So in this instance I went with the rear mount for the Immortal, and that was absolutely fine. You can see my Crossfire Nano is mounted in there, so that's sitting down flat, but there is so much room up the front. Let me just tilt this an angle where you can, there we go, that's probably better. There's so much room up the front for extra components and parts once you've got your mini cam in there. I've used that as a space to put my capacitor, 35 volt 1000 microfarad low ESR capacitor. That's up the front. Always stick a cap in. I know some people are like, it's fine without a cap. Trust me, it's not good for your electronics. Back EMF voltage spikes are nasty, and they're bad for it. Always run a cap in. It doesn't cost you anything. They're super cheap, and it's like, you know, what is it, a gram or something? It's really a must as far as I'm concerned. The other things we've got in here on this particular build that's probably worth mentioning, if you're wondering what these are, I'll put a link to these in the description. These are actually from Banggood. I think HaloRC may start stocking these as well. But these are kind of a race wire, but they have LEDs built into them, and they just work automatically as current passes through them. They will pulse. These ones pulse red. but you can get all sorts of different colours. I think you can actually get purple ones now, so I may very well replace these. But obviously it makes changing motors so quick and convenient, so I'm a big fan of these, and they fit perfectly across the width of these this 10mm wide arm, which is obviously fantastic. And I suppose we have to talk about them because you can't ignore the fact that these have these absolutely gorgeous iFlight Zing motors on there. Now, the setup I've gone for here is actually a little different for what I normally do. I'm usually a 2450 kV guy with a nice tall stator like a 2207, but I've decided, because this is a lighter build, and it has come in considerably lighter than the old design, the V1. I'll give you some figures for that at the end, but it's a pretty significant drop in weight. But because this whole thing is a little bit lighter, I've decided to go for a high kV setup. So these are the 2306 2750 Zing motors, so this thing should go like stink. I've actually got a ton of Zing motors that have turned up of different flavors, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be doing a load of testing. I will probably, after we've done a fair bit of flying on this, I'm going to probably take these off and try out the 2208 motors. And those look something like that. So these are the 2208 2450 kV. Very excited to test these out. So these may end up going onto this build just to try them out, or they may go onto the Archon V1. Either way, we're going to give these guys a good go. Another new design element is having these TPU inserts for the camera, which I think's again a great idea because it adds a little bit of dampening to the camera, especially as we're all moving to CMOS cameras now. It just helps that little bit more because they are a fraction more susceptible to vibration in the quad than, say, the CCD cameras are. So that's a really good thing. There are 3 hole patterns, and you can move the camera back depending on how big your lens is. Now you can see in the frontmost position with the short kind of stubby lens of the Foxeer Falcor that we have a decent amount of recess here, so there is definitely plenty of protection there for a frontal impact. But it's been measured to perfection because this is running a 1.8 lens, which is obviously super fisheye, and I have absolutely nothing in view that shouldn't be there. There's no GoPro, there's no edges of the frame, and nothing is in the way. And Chris has also kept this, which is having one of these standoffs higher up, and that is so if you hit the ground very hard and this acts, you know, sometimes your camera can knock down, it will stop at whatever this is, like 10 degrees or something like that, so that your camera will never end up facing the ground. I'm sure we've all done that, and you know it's never fun trying to fly home with your camera pointing at the ground. So yeah, really like the little TPU inserts there for that. In terms of other little bits on the frame, you can see there's little cutouts here also for adding, if you want to add zip ties in. There's holes in the bottom. There's different ways you can route the cable from the Immortal T depending on how you want to do that. And there's also, I believe, going to be a redesign of, or sorry, a second design for this this SMA mount out the back. There is going to be one that comes up into this little cutout here for an axis stubby to go in, so the TPU mount will come out and then pass through here and sit inside some of these recesses. So there's something that Chris has worked on, which again will be available for download. So there's loads of little TPU extras that Chris has spent lots of time working on that will be free downloads, or you can buy them from him at the shop. So if we go and get a weight of this with the battery, need to add a GoPro to that. Let's add some props. And then let's add some battery straps, and we have a weight of 633 grams. Perfectly respectable, and as I say, this has been just a fantastic fly, still flies fantastically. There is our benchmark weight, and if we do the same with the new one, we add the GoPro, add the battery, Let's add some props. These are the Dell 5040s, which are plenty enough for the high kV we're running. Oh, it's like Jenga here. Oh, there we go, we got it on. And then a couple of battery straps. 598 grams, which is perfect, right under that magic 600 gram number. So yeah, that is just absolutely ideal as far as I'm concerned. So in conclusion, I think this is a wonderful succession to the Archon V1, and as I said before, it's everything that a V2 of any product should be. You should look at the V1 under a microscope, take all the feedback, and then just refine this. It still looks like the Archon, it's got all the refinements in all the right places, plus it's lost weight. It's just absolutely wonderful. In terms of how this flies, well, you're going to have to wait and see. I've got a few clips I can show you here, but I will be doing some separate flight videos of this. But what I can tell you off the bat is it is absolutely magic to fly. So I'm really looking forward to doing some great freestyle videos with this year. If you've got any questions about this, you can either leave them in the comments section, or of course you can contact Bloods Chris over on Facebook in the HaloRC Facebook group. I suggest you go and join up there. He's also dropping a lot of new frame designs over there as well, if you want sneak peeks of some of the other things he has coming up, including a brand new race frame. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you might consider this frame. It's certainly going to be my main one moving forward. And all links will be in the description. Thanks for watching, guys. Questions in the comment section. Of course, you know I'm very active in there. Happy to chat with you. And I'll see you guys all in the next one.